Hello Internet, and welcome to the third year-end vlog for 2016. I'd make a joke about how bad this year has been, but honestly I am way too tired to really think of anything funny. And given how bad this year has been, and how heavy yesterday's video was, I wanted to talk about something that was a little bit more lighthearted, and kind of more is in my oeuvre of talking about film and television. If you've been watching Power Rangers for the past couple of years and you're a die-hard fan of the Super Sentai series, you may have been noticing a little bit of a pattern with Power Rangers as of late. What I mean by this is that you may have been noticing how Saban has been skipping to every other Sentai series rather than adapting each individual Sentai series as an individual Power Rangers series. And unless you've actually done a lot of the research to come to the same conclusions I have, well, you may be wondering why they're doing that. Now, keep in mind, a lot of what I'm going to say in this video is just my own speculation based on what information I have available, but it's nothing concrete unless someone from Bandai decides to make an official statement, so these are just more my theories as to why Saban has started skipping to every other Sentai series rather than adapting each one individually. And, in my opinion, it comes down to three major things. The first would be contracts. As a lot of people have discovered, Nickelodeon has a stipulation in their contract that a season of a TV show can't have more than 26 episodes. And if you looked at a lot of the past series of Power Rangers, a lot of those seasons would have as many as 50 episodes. As a result, they've more or less had to divide a lot of these seasons in half into what is basically the regular series and then the Super series, as first seen with Samurai and Super Samurai. And something to consider is that prior to this new arrangement Saban has with Toei, you have to consider that Saban had just barely wrestled control of the Power Rangers franchise back from Disney after Disney got a little bit greedy and tried to take control of the entire Super Sentai franchise worldwide. As such, a lot of the older contracts that Saban had previously negotiated were still in effect, where they were contractually bound to adapt each individual Sentai series as it came out. But because you have to have these seasons that are basically split in half, it means that a single Power Rangers series can run for 2 years, as opposed to one Sentai series usually running for 1 year. Naturally, this would cause quite a few problems, and so Saban found an interesting way to remedy this situation when they finished up with Samurai and were starting with Megaforce. Given that Megaforce is taking 2 Sentai series and smashing them into one, it seemed like the best possible option, using Goseiger as the basis for Megaforce, and then using the subsequent anniversary series Gokaiger for Super Megaforce, which would have fallen more in line with the 20th anniversary of the series. But then things started getting a little bit weird when, instead of an adaptation of Go Buster, Saban decided to skip straight to Kyoryuger. This leads me to the second factor of why Saban is being allowed to skip seasons, and that would be ratings. Both Super Sentai and Power Rangers have to compete for ratings from the general public, and when a Sentai series suffers in the ratings, it can have interesting ripple effects on Power Rangers. So what happened in the wake of the super successful anniversary season Gokaiger? Well, Toei came out with Tokume Sentai Go Buster, a series that was more focused on, well, cyber warfare, spies, appliances, as well as a universal energy source that had solved the world's energy crisis. And it did not do well in the ratings. Things got so bad they literally had to retool their whole premise halfway through, resulting in the first time in Sentai history a new opening theme. So naturally, if a show is not doing well in Japan, that means it may be a lot harder to adapt as a Power Ranger series. Now, they've done it before to moderate success, like with Power Ranger Zeo being adapted from Chodiki Sentai O-Ranger, another Sentai series that had its fair share of problems during its run. So now I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, okay, Romney, I get what you're saying. Because Go Buster had poor ratings, they decided to let Saban skip it because there was no guarantee it would do well for a US audience if it didn't do well in Japan. Now, some of you are then asking, why are they skipping Tokyuger, which is the series that followed Kyoryuger, which is the Sentai series that is adapted into Dino Charge? Well, that is another can of worms that I like to call a matter of cultural differences. You see, Resha Sentai Tokyuja is a train-themed Sentai series, and while we do have train enthusiasts here in the United States, it's not nearly to the same degree as the train enthusiasts you see in Japan, and there's also other factors to consider. You see, in Japan, trains are kind of an established part of daily life for a lot of people in Japan, whether they are taking the Shinkansen train to get from one place to another, whether for a vacation, usually for work, and it's just something that is more common to a lot of major Japanese cities than it is here in the United States, where, let's face it, our country is a great deal larger and we have a lot more open spaces that are more often traversed by cars. And while we've had successful train flourishes in other Power Ranger series, they've always been just that, flourishes, things that just happen to be the Megazord as part of a series that had a completely different motif. I mean, with Lightspeed Rescue, you had vehicles and rescue workers as the motif, and with Mystic Force, well, it was themed around magic. It just so happened that the Solaris Knights had a Megazord that was modeled after a train. As such, it's very unlikely that an entire train-themed Power Rangers series would be as successful in the United States because it's not nearly as relevant to an American audience as, say, dinosaurs or pirates or ninjas. Speaking of which, this leads to the third and I believe the largest reason why Saban is being allowed to skip seasons, and that would be the toys. Now, I know what you're thinking. It may just be, oh, it's because they don't want to risk having to make toys for seasons that did poorly in Japan. Well, that is part of it. I think there's another factor to consider. You see, with the Super Sentai series, a lot of each individual season is planned at least 3 years in advance. All the storylines are mapped out, the parts are cast, the toys are designed, the molds are made, everything is pretty much set to go before they begin production. So much so that they even create adult-sized morphers out of the same molds they use to make the toys as a cost-cutting measure. And given that Bandai has a major stake in the Super Sentai series' success, naturally they're going to want to have some control over how that series is distributed worldwide. Given that Saban's shows are having to last 2 years as opposed to just 1, that would naturally create a bit of a backlog of toys that Bandai would have to manufacture if they were to continue adapting each individual Sentai series into a full Power Rangers show. So for the sake of argument, say that they did decide to adapt Go Buster. 1 year of Super Megaforce, which is based on Gokaiger, and then you have 2 years of Go Busters. That's a full 2 years worth of toys after 2 full Sentai series have already come out in the wake of Go Buster that Bandai is still having to manufacture at the risk of not even really being able to sell them to a US audience. Now, again, we've had Sentai series with weirder premises adapted into moderately successful Power Rangers series, but I think that's the major factor that Bandai is probably asserting, that they don't want to keep manufacturing a bunch of older toys, they want to move on to the newer seasons, the newer stuff, and so it makes more sense for them to jump to every other Sentai series, meaning that if it's every other series, they don't have to have as large of a backlog of toys, and they can repurpose a lot of the older toys from a previous Sentai series in new and interesting ways, without having to hold on to a bunch of old molds. And that, to me, is probably the biggest reason why Saban is being allowed to skip seasons. You have the stipulation from the Nickelodeon contract, you have certain Sentai seasons that just did poorly in the ratings that they don't want to risk losing more money on by trying to adapt as a Power Ranger show, and at the same time, you have series that they don't want to keep making toys for if the series in Japan has already moved on to like another 3 or 4 Sentai. And honestly, the trend is probably going to continue for quite some time, especially when you look at the performance of Zyuohger, the current Sentai series, and how it's actually on track to be one of the lowest rated Sentai series in the history of the show. So that was my speculative rant as to why Saban has been allowed to skip to every other Sentai series. What do you guys think? Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Is there something that I missed that I really should have considered? Let me know in the comments below. But for now, that's 3 videos down, 2 more to go. I'll see you all next time.